No one ever wants to talk to me about who I am anymore.
That's all I want to talk to you.
I know. And that's what we talked about at the thing. I was like, you starts to feel a little isolating. Like you want to become this thing, and then all of a sudden people only want you to be that thing. And you're like, yeah, I'm a human. I literally put that in my bio on my new website. I put like human as part of my descriptive of what I am. Because I was like, and I decided that too when I really hated social media last year or a year or two ago. I went through a really rough phase with social media. I was like, let's bring humanness back to it. Because I was like, I think that's the only thing that's going to save me and my relationship and with my audience is if I start viewing people more as human and then they get to see me more as human. So I was really have been about like trying to, but then at the same time, you start to become known for this thing and you're like, I'm more than just like information. Like I'm not a Google, right? Like I'm a person, right?
So I went through that, and I know we're going to talk about that more a little bit later, but I went through that where the only thing people wanted to ask me about was, hey, I hurt my shoulder doing this, I hurt my knee doing this, I hurt my back doing this. What do you think of this kind of exercise? What do you think of this kind of sleep pattern? Like, and I'm like, I do love this stuff, and it is my career, and it is the thing that I want to be the best in the world at least did. Now I have people I want to be better than me at it. But I was like, ask me a question about me.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it. Like I even had a conversation with a friend of mine who I won't mention his name because most people would know him. And he was saying like, how do we are in the similar field. He's like, how do we beat out these big venture-backed companies who are just spending millions of dollars a month on marketing? And I said, I honestly believe that it starts when people stop asking you and me questions on podcasts about how to mobilize this, how to stretch that, how to recover from this. And they start asking us about how do we get here in the first place? And who are you? Why this, all of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's because for me, a big thing that I'm always drawn to when I'm consuming content, if I'm reading books or listening to podcasts, I'm like, I don't want to learn any more freaking information. I'm so sick of learning. And it's funny because I love to learn, but I'm like, it's all I freaking do is consume information. But I'm like, I want to hear someone's story. I want to hear about how they got from A to B or how they changed as a person or their like human journey. Because I feel like you learn a lot about one, how to be a human from that and then empathy with other people. But two, it's like, I feel like that's the part that makes people interesting, right? And that's what I'm like, that's what I want to hear about. And I agree. And it's not even like asking you about yourself, but it's like sometimes you're like, oh wait, there's so many things that I can share with you from about life or things that I've done that can benefit you or like how I've got from A to B more than just here's the perfect lifting and running split. Like that's not the question that you actually need answered anyway. No. The answer isn't even what's the perfect split because the reason you can't find a perfect split is because you don't know how to human in your own life and balance your obligations and the guilt between your kids and your life and your work. Like that's the stuff that probably is actually impacting that more. But I don't know. I think that's where you start to feel, I noticed the shift. And it started to feel, it's not that those questions are bad, but you start to feel empty when you only get asked that all of the time. You're like, oh, no one gives a shit about me as a person. They just care about what I can do for them. And, you know, you're out there to help people, but you're like, it feels very disconnected to like your mission. Because at the same, you know, you come climbing up for years as like a person on this mission to help people. And then you're like just a vessel of like, press go and give me the answer kind of thing. And you're like, it's fine. I expect to get asked that. But when you stop getting asked anything but that, you're like, oh, like this feels empty. This kind of isn't what I wanted actually at the end of the day. Let's bring the humanist back in. Because I did that for a while as I really removed myself from my brand, partially because of how people were treating and behaving me. And I felt like I needed to like protect myself a little bit. But I overcorrected to the point where I removed myself so much from that I also can't blame people for getting to that point with me. But you're like, you don't want to be asked for the 10,000th time how to mobilize something. You want to ask, how did you grow active life to this capacity and what you did and how you got there? I also want to be asked why should we mobilize anything? Like I'm happy to talk about the content, right? But you said something that I'm gonna push you on a little bit. You said I'm tired of learning, and I think that what I heard you say was not actually that you're tired of learning. I heard you say you're tired of people saying, look at that. Yeah. And you'd rather people say, look that way. Yes. And that's a better way of putting it. Because I still like to learn. I think it's just like the inundation of constant, like, you have to, you know, take this in, take this in, take this in, take this in. And it's like, why am I taking this in? Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know where I first heard the expression, but the expression was, don't tell me tell me where to look, not what to see. And the idea, like, I learn way more from listening to entrepreneurial documentaries and stories about companies and how they battled each other and how they came up. Yeah. Than I learned if someone's like, here's the formula for anything. Like I
I bought Masterclass for a year. Have you ever dabbled in it?
I haven't. I know what it is.
Okay.
I've looked at it. I've seen some of it, but I haven't consumed any of it.
So it's a cool program, and there's a lot of interesting stuff to pick up. But the things I think I learned from it were not necessarily the things that they were trying to intentionally teach. And I learned from doing that the thing I am much more inspired by is just learning about people. Mm-hmm. And then I can decide what I want to decide that means.
Yeah.
So how were people treating you? What do you mean you had to withdraw? People were treating you a certain way.
I went through a weird phase in 2020 through like 2022 into a little bit of last year for me on the social media was this weird place of like, one, I was not in the best place myself. Like
2020 to 2022 was weird for you?
Yeah, with everyone.
On social media?
Yeah, and it was a weird mix of both the pandemic, but my page was growing, my expertise was growing, and I think people's behaviors on top of that made everything extra weird. But it started to get like both a weird mix of people becoming like too parasocial with me. Like
what's parasocial mean?
So parasocial relationships are like the one-sided relationships that people have with you in like online space, or they have with like celebrities. Like the Swifties have a parasocial relationship with Taylor, even though Taylor doesn't actually know them like individually. So people get this in the online space, and there's positives to it, right? Like there's like, we're just in here talking about how we like people's stories and they inspire us. So like there's positive things that come from parasocial relationships. We're humans. We want to relate. We want to feel like we belong. We want to, we want to have that connection with the people that we're purchasing from or learning from. And I think that's fine. But it started to get really weird. Like people started to like tell me when they saw me running or send pictures of me running, or tell me they Googled my race results to figure out where I finished, or asked me where I was living, or were trying to find Easter eggs in my content about where I was moving and where I was doing my postdoc, or like were like sending me just very weird, overly personal things as if we were like I knew them, and like it just started to feel like almost like unsafe and kind of weird, and it was very perfectly innocent, but it just started to kind of creep me out when people were being too like almost like expecting me to meet this unrealistic demand for everyone of like answering things and being like everyone's bestie or everyone's personal responder or coach via the online space, or like to be everything to everyone all the time. And it started to get weird in some ways where people were just being like creepy about stuff too, and they didn't realize they were being weird. And I was like, this is like too much. Like it's not a healthy like, hey, you've really motivated and inspired me in this, and like I chose to go back to school because of this, because it encouraged me. Like that stuff's fine, but it started to get like, where do you live? Like, can I wear your skin? I was like, okay, I'm cool, but I am not that cool. And then it was like this mix too of like, during that time I was under so much stress between the pandemic and my PhD and growing my business that like looking back, I was like clinical level burnout. Like I was just very like, when I look back now, my mental health then was so bad that like seeing it in the contrast of where it is now, I'm like, oh, wow. So I was also dealing with, when everyone on the internet was aggressively online, people were really mean, like very mean all of the time, like nitpicky and naggy and correcting and mean and rude. And I definitely didn't handle myself the best way either in those situations.
How did you handle yourself?
You get defensive, or you're rude back to people who are blatantly rude to you, instead of like ignoring it or handling it with more tact than they're handling it with. Or you get into situations where you don't think you're doing anything wrong, but people then manipulate the situation back to like making it seem like you're the bad guy when they like come into your inbox just screaming at you. Like imagine just walking to someone's front door and just start yelling at them. Right. Like, what do you expect them? Like, so it was just like this weird time where like looking back, I'm like, I've learned and matured on how to handle those things a little bit better. Right. But people were like weirdly like, I want to wear your skin, mixed with like, oh, I'm going to yell at you for every single thing that you do. You reshare this person's post and I don't like the thing they post last Wednesday, and I'm going to make it your problem that I don't like the thing that they post last Wednesday. Or we just talked about this. I think I'm dyslexic, so I make typos and spelling issues all the time, and people were like ruthlessly so mean to me about this all the time. And I'm like, I'm not trying to do this. I check my stuff. I just don't see it. And then just little things like everything you post, there's something that someone's going to complain or be mad about. And I think part of that came to do with like people being very online and magnified from the pandemic. But it was like this, it was to the point that I was waking up in the middle of the night and deleting stories or post. I was like I would be afraid to post anything, like even within my niche, because it was like everything just like set everyone off about everything all the time. And it was then, I started to feel like I became like the opposite of the problem now. Is like so much of a person that people wanted me to be like everything to them. And I was like, this is too much for me to do. Like I'm trying to just survive and get through my PhD and grow my business. And I can't have this pressure of feeling like I have to reply to everything and like give everyone 100% all the time. So it felt like a lot for a long period of time there. And it was like, it felt like very aggressively online. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, if I'm going to run a social media business, I have to change this. And it's going to change with me, right? So one, I stopped being as much of an asshole. Even if people were being assholes to me, I had to stop. Kind of like when you realize that you had to stop being you had to be a better person.
Yep.
And I was like, this isn't really who I am. This is like a defense mechanism of me being like growing up. You know, it's funny because people are mean online, but people were very mean to me my whole life growing up. I had a burn book written about me in 5th grade.
Really?
My Girl Scout leaders kept me after Girl Scouts in 6th grade, the moms, and lectured me about how I made cheerleading and it made their daughters feel bad and I should feel ashamed for like being successful. I was called loud and annoying. My 6th grade teacher wouldn't invite me to the tour day when my brother came to tour the junior high when I was in 8th grade because he's 2 years below me because she didn't like me. And then my mom got me in and she was like, oh, I see some things never changed because I was just loud. I was like your classic eldest daughter, loud, leader, driven, out there, obnoxious. That's just who I was, right? And I just constantly got resistance from coaches and peers and teachers growing up about how that was bad and I should feel bad about that. So then you get on the online space and it's the same crap. I got the same thing in college. I got the same thing in my master's, same thing in my PhD. All the girls in my PhD program basically like try to bully me out. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do my research and keep to myself. So I was like, none of this is new to me. So I was like, okay, well, like you've been dealing with this your whole life. And if you're going to be in the online space, you're going to have to live with this. People hate you and they're always going to hate you and that's fine. But you don't have to engage with that. But also people like you and they love you, but you have to choose like the limits on what you're going to let them like and love you kind of thing that keep you kind of protected and sane. So I kind of had this like big refresh of like, okay, if I'm going to be in the online space, I want to be a human and I want to be myself. I don't want to have to filter what I think you have to do because you're a professional or you think you have to share because that's what people expect you to share or be. And I'm going to do it on my terms. And so, you know, there was a lot of stuff I didn't post for a while there that was very human. I just became very like information, generic, go through the motions. And it wasn't fun for me because I didn't get to be creative. I didn't get to be a person. I wasn't sharing myself. And I think I needed to pull back for a little bit there. But I just decided, I was like, let's just make social Instagram human again. I was like, let's just start being a person again in the way that I want to be a person. And kind of like you, when you talked about, I really related to that, like you have to be a better person. I started just handling the way I engaged with everything more to like my truest self, I guess. As cheesy as that sounds. Not my defensive self, not my angry self, not my like, holy shit, I've been punching at the air since I was in 6th grade. Why can people just not leave me alone self? You know what I mean? Like that kind of feeling. And I was like, I just need to like hit a reset on this. And it's actually been a lot more enjoyable. And people are less aggressive towards me. Like the way I've behaved, you know, the way you behave in the online space dictates how people engage and behave to you. And I've got a lot better at buffering out those interactions with people before they escalate into something. Even if my reply isn't going to escalate them, like I can usually diffuse it before they realize they're projecting or they're angry about something else, or it's not me that they're mad at, or I'm a human being and I made a mistake, because we all make mistakes and you don't hold up a mirror to yourself in the online space. We're always just looking and pointing at others, mixed with like, okay, well, what's the sides of a human that I want people to see of me? And I think that are, you know, this sounds kind of egotistical, but like the parts of me that I think actually can benefit people's lives, that they can learn from or be inspired from, or what are the things of other people's stories that I feel drawn to, and how can I share that in a way that feels like I'm still protecting like the really personal parts of my life so that people aren't seeping in, so I don't feel like I'm like being smothered by like, oh, you're trying to figure out where I'm moving. That feels weird. Why do you need to know that kind of thing? So like I just had to kind of hit a big reset on how I just engaged with creating content and being in the online space. And it has actually been monumentally better. But I knew, I was like, I'm either getting offline and I'm burning it all down, or I have to make this better for myself. It's way too lucrative to get offline. Like I needed the job. So I was like, how can I make this better for myself? And that was a big thing, is like, how do I be a human, right? And I think that if you're a human, people are going to criticize and judge you for being a person. But it also allows you to, you're not filtering everything that you do all of the time. And that felt like a lot of stress and pressure and anxiety, to constantly be filtering everything I did so that I didn't make someone mad, or that I didn't have to deal with the outrage, or that, you know, someone's going to get too creepy with me or something like that. So yeah, I kind of about probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was like, something needs to change, or I'm going to be miserable every single day for the rest of my work.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all of that. I imagine when you grow up that way, first of all, it strikes me as, I already know that you're very intelligent, right? And so I imagine that was always a thing. I know that you worked hard too, but I imagine you always had some level of intelligence. And then you achieved. And so it makes, I imagine people hated you less and resented you more, because it allowed them to see what they could be if they applied themselves and had your genetics.
Yeah.
But they were missing one and or the other. And so seeing you excel and then still be thirsty and hungry for more led them to saying, how about you just sit down and shut up because you're making all of us feel bad about ourselves. And it's like, actually, I'm not making you do anything. I'm just being me, and you're deciding that me existing is making you feel bad.
Yeah. And it feels vain to say that, but that's really been, and
that's what it is.
But it's exactly what it is. And it's like, and I've never, even when I was young, I was never mean about making cheerleading, and I wasn't rubbing it in those girls' faces.
I mean, you didn't.
I just did it. You didn't try out. You didn't want to do it. You didn't try. Like, and that's the thing is like, I went and got my back. This is like the most quintessential, like, I feel like pivot story of my life is like, I got my back handspring the day before tryouts for junior high cheerleading because there was a snowstorm that delayed the tryouts, and I said, I'm getting it tonight. And I just went and I threw myself backwards. And I was like, until I got it.
Right.
And I was like, but you didn't do that, right? Because that's ingrained to me. I think also, like, if when we want to talk about genetics, I think being kind of crazy is ingrained to me. I think you have that
for sure.
That same default bug.
You just met my parents.
Yeah, right? And
my father told you to be careful because I get my wife pregnant all the time.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up.
Yes. So, and I think that's exactly what it was, is like, when I was in college, I mean, I've really moved on past a lot of this stuff, but it's funny, I was thinking about this weekend because I went to visit my race. All I got in college was people who hated me, who were also pissed that I was always studying and always trying to do well in school and getting good grades. I was like, you're mad that I'm not out partying, but you literally don't even like me. So why do you want me here? And I was like, it's because my work and my grades and what I'm doing is a reflection of what you're not. But it's like, you don't even like me. So why do you care? The only reason that you can care is because it's reflecting something in you that you don't like. And then I got to my master's, and there was these two guys in my master's who, like, I remember they kept me in and shut the doors and lectured me because they were in their 30s and I'm like 23. And I'm like, you're just pissed that you didn't go to school right out of undergrad, and I'm smart and I'm getting opportunities because I'm putting myself out there and I'm trying hard. And like I'm 23-year-old working my ass off. Like, and you're just pissed because of this. And you're lecturing me like my father. It's like, you don't get to do that, right? Like, you don't. And it's just like, I learned very early on that I was like, it was just everyone kind of mad at you for being and doing the things that they weren't willing to take chances on themselves. And I said, there's two routes that you can take out of that. You can either live life with a chip on your shoulder and, throw your middle fingers up to everyone and like fight back at people. And I'm like, or I just make a bigger table. Or I can just use my success or my whatever to share with people, like, hey, you can go do those things, whatever that looks like for you. Or, hey, let's make a bigger table for other women coming up for this stuff. And I was like, I just chose to take the higher road. And I was like, no, I want you to succeed too. Like, you can hate me all you want, but I want you to succeed too. Because I'm not going to stoop to your level of making people feel shitty because they're ambitious and work hard, because you can do that too. Like, no, obviously not everyone has the same opportunities, but like, if we're all in the same graduate program, we probably all have similar accessibility to resources and things. So like, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've learned, at least through experience through entrepreneurship, is in the beginning. Let me go back even further. When I was in school, I was the opposite of you. We would have gotten along because we would have seen each other.
Yeah.
But I was the opposite. Like, when I was studying for my board exams, I studied 70% of the material.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to know 100% this 70%. And then have faith in myself to get the rest of the questions right. So I had good friends. I wasn't hated by everybody, but there were plenty of people who resented me because I wasn't studying as hard as they were. I wasn't giving them a hard time for studying, but they would be like, you think you're so smart that you don't need to study. I'm like, no, I just don't care what grade I get.
Yeah. I
really don't. Like, I'm not seeking validation from the grade.
Yeah.
I just want to get through this thing.
That's really nice to be able to not seek your validation from
it was nice. Well,
yeah.
You know where actually it turned out that I didn't realize it would help me. But when we got to board exams, I have a good friend who chiropractic school boards are actually notoriously difficult. And part 4 is performative. You have to actually take mock patients through exams and whatnot. And I only studied 70% of 100%. I had friends who were trying to study 100% of 100%. So when I didn't know something, I was just like, I guess I didn't study that. And I wasn't stressed by that into the next question. The next question, I was just like, oh yeah.
That's such a good point, because it's not the like, oh my God, I remember, but I can't remember type panic that
I was just like, oh, see, I don't,
yeah.
I must not have studied that. And I never failed the board exam. And I did really well on them. The same was true for my SATs. My mom went to University of Pennsylvania and NYU, graduated in 3 years. Okay. Very, very intelligent.
Yeah.
My father scrapped his way through college at like I think he started at Miami-Dade Junior College to play baseball, and then he ended up at like Bridgeport University to just check the box.
Yeah.
Right. Then he went to chiropractic school. Worked really hard all of his life. But so my mom was like, you got to do well on your SATs. I'm like, I don't. I really don't care. She's like, but you want to go to college? I'm like, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like I'll play baseball in college, which I didn't. And I'll go where I go. And so for me, the grades were never a big deal. But once you get into the real world, there's a lot of, you should do this. You should do this. Like I got offered a job working in the financial district in Hong Kong, and it was a really lucrative job. Really lucrative. And everybody I know outside of my immediate family was like, you're crazy. You should take that job. I'm like, I don't want that job.
Yeah.
But so now when you start into entrepreneurship, what I find is because you're not with people all the time like you are in school, it's a different kind of isolation where you're trying to do something that other people don't relate to or understand. And in the beginning, they're trying to keep you safe from it.
Yeah.
Then you demonstrate, I'm actually safer here and thriving.
Yeah.
And then there's this resentment of, well, you must have stepped on people to get there. You must have done unethical things to get there. And it's like, well, if you think putting my ass on the line and working insane hours on my business and myself is unethical, then yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of
it's unethical to ourselves probably at some points in
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
But so that's why I'm really flattered, and I appreciate that you came out here to do this podcast in person.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's this like there are these gaps in entrepreneurship. You start a new business, there's a group of people who are also starting a new business, and that's who you become friends with, and it's great. Some of you excel, some of you don't. The ones who excel stay friends for a little bit. Then there's oftentimes this like, I don't have time to be friends. I think I have to bury myself in this, right? So you're by yourself. Then you're like, oh, fuck, I'm missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to do both. And then we come up and we're in this phase of business where there's a level of success that we're experiencing that is inspiring to a group of people. We have a hard time being content with it. We're looking at a level of success that other people have and think that those people don't want relationships with us yet because we're not on their level. And so I just think it's useful and valuable to make sure that we're building and maintaining these relationships at the levels that we're at.
Yeah. No, it's funny that you say that because I remember, like, I feel like everyone was starting a business in 2018, 2019 on social media. And it's, you kind of feel like an asshole because it's like, I never actually intended for what I created to be what I created. But because I'm bug default, I was just going to always push until I pushed no more, right? Like I don't know that. But when I was starting that, I left my first PhD program. I went home 2 weeks later. I had my brother and sister-in-law take photos with me on my sister-in-law's father's professional camera. I said, I'm starting a business. And everyone just was like, okay, you're starting a business, whatever. I moved to Louisville with my now husband. I worked overtime at a Dick's Sporting Goods to make money. And I remember I'd go to this coffee shop on this 2011 laptop that would like overheat if I used it for like.
This is 2018?
This is now 2017 going into 2018. Yeah. Making the ugliest PDF programs that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm selling them on social media because I'm starting a business this year. I'm starting my PhD. I'm training for my first ultra marathon and I'm starting a business.
And I imagine you didn't have a huge following back then.
I think I had like 2,000 or 3,000 followers. Right. It's because from when I was powerlifting, because I started making my Instagram in my master's as a way to just kind of like share my lifting. And I would get, you get questions from friends and family about fitness. So I just, I had maybe 2,000 or 3,000 followers at this point in time. And I'm like, I'm starting a business. I'm restarting my PhD. I literally quit my PhD. I was like, I want to be an exercise physiologist. I was at Vanderbilt, the best molecular physiology program in the country, and I left it. Right? Because the head of the department basically made me feel stupid. And I said, I'm not stupid and you're not going to make me feel stupid. So I'm going to go somewhere else and do what I actually want to do. So I left.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you keep saying things that I want to bring back attention to and ask you a question. There's a saying that is like, if everyone around you is an asshole, you're the asshole.
Yeah.
How did you stay resolute that no, I'm not the problem here. I'm the problem for these people because they have problems. I
think for me, one, I feel like I was definitely your cliche kid who grows up fast and acts like an adult and thinks like an adult very early on. And I think that I saw early on, because I had so much resistance from like adults and peers as early as elementary school. And I realized like I wasn't doing anything wrong. People are just like mad at me for being who I am. And my parents, the one thing, not saying they didn't do other good things, but the one thing that I really am grateful for they always did is they never try to make me be smaller or shrink me down. And like they kept encouraging me, like, you're going to be a leader. You are smart. You know what I mean? Like, who you are isn't too much kind of narrative. So I think I always kind of had that good self-awareness and backbone, even at a young age, of like who I was. I still needed to figure that out a lot. But I think that, you know, I knew that I always wanted to help people. I knew that I believed I was a good person. I was very hurt by how mean people were to me more than anything, but I never really resented them. But it probably wasn't until I was in like my 20s where I realized that projection and lack of kind of thing. And I do think to some extent people made me be an asshole because of how they treated me. So I think I've learned from that lesson. But I think that the one thing that really helped me, because I can even think back to like when I was like a teenager, I think I spent a lot of time alone in my head listening to music. Like, as much as I was like the cheerleader, popular blonde girl, I was like an emo kid, like listening to music and running on my back roads and like being introspective. So I think I just, from a very young age, I was really in my head. And I've always been a big dreamer and visionary, because I literally was 15 running, picturing myself standing on stages talking to people on like how to live their life and exercise and how it's going to change your life. Like, I literally swear to God, I was like, I'm going to spend my whole life doing this because I want to give this gift to other people. So I think part of it was like being very aware and sure of myself. And when you kind of get excluded for being a little bit crazy, then you kind of I just leaned into it. I was like, this is just,
right.
I love sports. I love working hard. I love exercising. I'm going to share it with everyone. I didn't actually even identify as smart or nerdy. I was a good student, but I wasn't great in high school. But I just really cared about that one thing. So I think that I just kind of went into it, and then I started to just be known as like being into that. But then when I got pushed back even along the way in high school, I don't know. I think it's just like I was more sure of myself from a young age, because I kind of, when people are that mean to you, you have to kind of, you either hate yourself, like a lot of people do. They either turn and they hate themselves and they like have a lot of self-loathing and they feel bad about themselves. Or I think I just leaned into at a very young age of like, I believe in my dream and I believe in my vision and I'm my biggest fan and I love myself. So it was this kind of opposite of like hating myself to being like, I am my number one fan. I believe in me. No one else has to see my vision or my goals or understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. Only I do. I didn't realize how lonely that was though, until I started to get support from people as I came up through the top. So I think it was like just a mix of just how my parents raised me, mixed with I'm kind of a tenacious, stubborn little asshole, and I'm a little bit angry and defensive, and nobody's going to tell me who I am. I'm going to tell you who I am. And I kind of always had that wired in me. So when people were kind of telling me to sit down, shut up, be less, like, I was like, no, you're not going to tell me what to do. If anything, I'm going to show you. Like I was, I had that fuck you fire that people like to call. I was like, no, I'm going to show you that I'm going to show you kind of thing. And I definitely have moved past that enough in the last probably 5 years where I no longer am driven by spite and proving people or anything like that. It's definitely a lot more like back to that grounded vision of like, I want to help people and I want to share things and I want to be a human and do human things. But yeah, there was a lot of years there where I was just like, I was really hurt and I just kind of leaned into believing in myself instead of letting others. And it was very lonely and isolating at many points in time. But I remember I went to college and I walked onto my lacrosse team and nobody liked me. I was the worst one on the team. I'm loud and obnoxious, so they're calling me annoying Alyssa behind my back. But then everyone needed a tutor. But I didn't know that I was good at school. I'm walking on this team. I suck at lacrosse. The team hates me. And I'm like, okay, I'm convinced I'm going to fail out of every science class I'm taking because I didn't identify as smart growing up. All my friends were going to be PTs and doctors and all this stuff. I didn't identify as smart. So I was in health science because I knew I went to college. I wanted to be an exercise physiologist. I thought that was like a Nike Pro personal trainer, elite. So I'm in the science track, not like the personal training track. I'm in biology and anatomy and all these upper level sciences. I get 8 tutors. I'm a Division II full-time fall ball lacrosse schedule for training, exercise, all this stuff. I'm in classes. I'm in 8 tutors a week for everything. I'm going to 2 biology tutors a week. I'm going to tutor for every freaking class that I'm taking because I'm so convinced that I'm going to fail out of school. The first bio test comes along, I get an A. The second bio test comes along, I get an A. Everyone's getting C's. Everyone's not passing. All of a sudden it's, Alyssa's passing. So I ended up tutoring half the team. And then all of a sudden people like me because and then I became friends with a lot of them after we went through. But
because they realized you're a person.
Once they realized I was a person, but it was funny because it was like I spent the first 8 weeks of college just like studying alone. Everyone was out day drinking and partying, and I was laying out my anatomy flashcards in the textbook. I remember sitting in my dorm room floor and doing this because I was like, I have no friends. I'm so lonely. But I was like, instead of like being a recluse, I'm like, well, I'm going to go do something with myself. And so I leaned into that and I studied hard. And then once everyone realized I was a person, I became friends with everyone and they liked me and all that stuff. But I feel like that's been the game of my whole life is like people like, I don't know, like they kind of forget you're a person to some degree. And I think when you work hard and you're kind of a little bit more, I think for as extroverted as I am very like also very introverted into myself. So I don't let people like.
Well, you can be extroverted and introspective.
And very introspective. And you don't just start unloading that on people when you first meet them. You're just not like, here, let me share with you Bon Iver's album and why I love this and how we can reflect on this, right? Like, it's like, we're not going to talk about that on the first time we hang out, right? Like,
do you remember the first person who saw you and supported you outside of your family?
Yes. Let me think. There was someone before this. I had this lacrosse coach in high school on my travel team. I still talk to her still today. Her name's Becky. My high school lacrosse coaches, I was always too much for the team. I was very emotional. I cared so much. I was definitely a lot. I remember being so heartbroken because they didn't make me captain my junior year. They didn't make me captain until my senior year. I cared so much, but I went to every single practice, even if it was optional, and I knew those coaches didn't. The one coach liked me, the one I knew she just didn't like me. And that hurt because I loved them. But I did travel lacrosse 1 year because my family couldn't afford for me to do it more than 1 year. And you need to go do travel stuff to get recruited and blah, blah, blah. And Becky was probably the first person who like really like saw that and fed into me and encouraged me. And I still talk to her now to this day.
How did she do it?
You know, I think that she just was one of the first coaches who saw my potential. I think the biggest thing for me is when I think about every adult along the way who saw my potential is they never try to squash me. They just let me like bloom. They let me just be me. They didn't try to buffer it. Or if anything, they saw it. And when they saw it, they didn't say, oh, you need to dial it down. It was like, you need to lean into that. You need to keep doing that. That's a good, like, it was like everything that everyone saw about me that was bad or a negative trait. It was like she was one of the first few people that saw it as a good trait. Like being tenacious and a leader and driven and hardworking and like kind of encouraged it and fed into that. And I think that was really helpful for me to have outside of my parents because I just didn't have a lot of teachers and peer support in that kind of way growing up. And when you're an athlete, your coaches are like, you idolize them, right?
All you want is their approval.
All you want is their approval. I'm your classic. Yeah. And then when I got into college and grad school, I had
it's like what you're doing right now.
I know.
That's you and
that's
you're the
me.
coach.
And so I think I got really lucky along the way having a lot of academic mentors that believed in me and didn't try to squash me. And if anything, like opened up doors or showed me things that I didn't even know were possible because they saw something in me that others either saw and didn't like, or I saw, but I didn't even know how far I could take that. Because you don't know. Like I just worked hard and I headed in a direction, but I didn't know where it was going. And like, you don't do it alone. But I think, I started to have this series of these. Come here, Cone.
It's okay.
You're okay.
We got a dog in studio.
I know. We got Kona in the studio. And I started
She's been pretty good.
No, she does pretty good. I know. Come here. And I think if it wasn't for those coaches and those mentors that started to like just saw this. I mean, I'm looking back at my young self. And it's funny when people ask me who my hero is and who I look up to younger me. She had grit and tenacity, and she just went after everything, and she didn't take no for an answer, and she didn't care who hated her or who thought it was stupid, or she was doing it. She was just going. And I had Dr. Dixon in undergrad who saw that in me early on. He was my advisor, and then he was like my research advisor, and then he's the one who was like, you can go to grad school and get it paid for, and we can do research, and like, talked me off the ledge of all my life crises. And then I had Dr. Haley who kind of came in and did that, and then my master's advisors were fantastic, and I'm like insecure as the day is long. Think I'm stupid, imposter syndrome out the wazoo. I don't deserve these opportunities. I'm a fraud. I don't know why they want me here. And I think if I didn't have those mentors then who in that phase of like that insecurity phase of like, I'm wearing shoes way too big for me to fill right now, I couldn't have done what I'm doing now because they kept being like, no, you are smart. You are good at this. You can do this kind of thing. So I think like a pass off of coaches to academic mentors and advisors who really saw that and fostered that in me was that was more important to me than any resistance I had from peers or people in the space around me, because it was just having people kind of a few steps ahead who see what you can do that you can't see yet because you don't see 3 steps ahead. was huge for me. So I think that those started to become more pivotal to me, probably late high school, then into college and grad school. I started to get more of these like mentors or peers or advisors or people a couple steps ahead of me who started to like bring me up with them kind of thing. And that was huge for me. And of course, I want the approval of my mentors and my advisors and my teachers. I want to get all A's, all this stuff. But I also like, I'm going to take every opportunity and say yes. You know what I mean? Like I said yes to everything. I did everything that I could. And I think people that were adults, they start to see that. They were like, oh, she's going to go do things. Like
she's showing up.
She's showing up. Yeah. And that's how I got every opportunity. I thought, oh, you're getting this because you're lucky. And it was like, no, because I was working my ass off and people saw that. So they brought me in and started giving me more opportunities. So I think that's where things started to rocket fire for me, at least in the academic space. But in entrepreneurial space, that was, to wrap it back to what we were saying, I started my new PhD. I'm training for my first ultra. I start my business. And I was like, I don't feel like anyone around me, even my now husband, really saw the vision of what I was pushing for. I don't think I had anybody buy into that except for my dad. My dad was like, you don't need to do a PhD. You're a marketing genius. You should be doing business. Because I was going to go to school for marketing to begin with. He was like, you're wasting your earning potential. You are brilliant. Like my dad was like, he's like pumping me up kind of thing. And I was like, Dad, you need to trust me on this one, that this degree is worth my time, but I'm also going to make something of myself in parallel with it. And he bit his tongue. He was like, you're right. He's like, I take back everything I said. But it was coming from a place of love of like, you are just.
What he was trying to say was, you don't need this to become who you already are.
Yes.
And you were saying, I'm not going for this to become who I already am. I'm going for this because it's on the way to where I want to be.
Yes. And so I was always really lucky that my mom never squashed me. And my dad thinks that I am like my dad's like the radiant father who thinks that I'm like capable of anything and everything.
So his photos in his wallet.
Yeah, like when he talks about me, he's like, my daughter, blah, blah. And like me and my dad have a lot in common. So my dad just always kind of encouraged me along the way with all those decisions and everything. And I think that was helpful. But when I first started my PhD, like I started my business because I was broke. You're not thinking, oh, I'm gonna try to make a multi 6-figure working like 7-figure business, blah, blah, blah. You're like, no, I need to pay my bills this summer. I need a new computer, right? I'm in my PhD, I'm going towards academia, all that stuff. But I was like, and so nobody really saw it at first, you know what I mean? But I don't know, for some reason I saw it and I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I don't feel like, I think it was probably around 2020, probably about 2 years into doing that, where I started to feel like people start going, oh, you're actually doing this. Oh, this is a thing. Oh. So it was interesting to see that lag after, like, you're getting your PhD, so everyone's like, oh, you have your life together, you know what you're doing, blah, blah. And then you're a first year grad student. You don't know. You're
just going to go into research for $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that forever.
And I'm going to be
safe.
Yeah, right? Well, that's what's funny. That's why I bring it back to this, is because now what you were just saying, I had to link up all of my stories, is how I felt. So I'm still finishing up my postdoc, but I was, I'm at the end of my PhD and I'm like, academia, business. And academia gives you this massive guilt that you are a failure and you're not successful and you aren't a real scientist and you're not, if you're not in that publish or perish academic pipeline, like you're not, I don't know, like you're not as credible.
The status
or as
over
good.
there
the status
is publishing.
Yeah. And so, I felt this tear because I love research and science, and I'm still not fully convinced that I'll ever stay 100% out of it. And I might still try to do, a hybrid type career job, because apparently I love working 2 to 3 jobs at a time. But, it's funny because I never shared on my CVs or my academic resumes, my business. I didn't talk about any of it. So I'm on paper academically, I'm very successful. But if you put in conjunction what I've done in my business on top of academic, you're like, holy shit, that's insane, right? But I was too afraid to say that out loud because it looked bad. It looked distracting. I never wanted anyone to think that what I was doing over here was deterring from my PhD or my research or how much I cared about being in academia or my postdoc work. So I just didn't talk about it. I'm literally working 2 careers, building up 2 jobs, 2 everything, and I'm doing really well at both of them. And it's like, okay, well, you have to just make sure that this never looks like it's bad to this, or it's a failure to this, or don't talk about this. And then, it got to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm really good at both of these things. And this, you can't be 100% at 100% for everything all the time, like when you're building up. But you felt that, I think I'm finally moving past that, maybe in the last 6 months, honestly, to a year, where you don't feel that pressure of like what you should, and kind of bring about creatures, like you should be doing this. This is what you should be doing. This is correct, or this is ideal, or this is the more what's the word? Like it's more prestigious to be doing this work over here than this silly little side thing. And I felt a lot of pressure for that for the longest time. And I'm like, am I going to be a failure if I leave academia? Which is so stupid because you're so underpaid for being so smart. And then you feel the guilt of like, well, there's all these people that are brilliant in academia who aren't getting the exposure and the opportunities and the stuff that I'm doing. But I'm like, I put my ass on the line for 6 years while I did all this stuff. So it was like this big conflict kind of towards the end of my PhD between like the shoulds versus like, okay, well, what about all these other things that are happening? And I think I made the best decisions at the time. But it is funny how those same themes come back like every few years, a next chapter of your life.
From what I'm hearing, it's less actually about status, and it's more about how you want to influence and help other people.
Yes.
Because you talked about talking on stages when you were 15 years old in your brain. Academics do talk on stage, typically to other academics.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being this silo of self-informed status.
Yes.
Where what you decided to do is something that, quite frankly, somebody with a weekend certification has the same license to do that you do.
Yep.
And you have to find a way, and you have, to allow people to recognize, oh, Alyssa Olenick is different at this than these other people are. If I want this, I go to them. If I want that, I go to Alyssa. There is no status in that inherently, right? Like when you say, if you go to a dinner with all of your parents' friends or they're trying to impress people and their friends said, I'm not saying your parents would do this, but their friends or their colleagues or the people they're trying to meet said, what do you do, Alyssa? And you're like, oh, I'm an online fitness coach. They'd be like, oh, because they don't understand.
You know what's funny? People ask me a lot what I do, like on airplanes and in passing. And it's funny because I always, when I say run my business, I always find myself saying, but I have a PhD in this field.
So have you figured out a way to say it?
So I kind of feel like I do it as like a caveat of like, I'm not just a personal trainer. Like I'm better than that, which sounds mean, but it's like.
I follow. Listen, you're speaking the same life I lived.
Yeah.
It's similar ages.
Because people are like, oh, I'm like, or I'll come up with research. They're like, so what do you do for your job? And then you feel like an asshole because you're like, oh, well, I run my own business. I've been
experimenting with how to answer that question since the beginning of time. So
yeah,
for me, it wasn't leaving academia. It was leaving chiropractic.
Yeah, similar.
I had a clinical practice, and my biggest fear was not making less money. Like I knew I would for a little bit, but it was telling my parents, I'm going to let this go to become an online fitness coach, which I could have done, by the way, as the personal trainer I was before I went to chiropractic school.
Yeah.
And I practiced how that conversation was going to go because I had to convince myself of it. It took me almost 9 months to convince myself I was going to do this. And then once I decided, it was over. Like I decided in September. I told my wife on December 18th, 2017, and I was out of clinic by January 1. All the things were already in motion. I told my parents in the week between Christmas and New Year's. And I was like, look, I practiced saying, I know that you want me to be happy. Yes, I am happier in the pursuit of this uncertain thing that I'm passionate about than I am in the certainty of the success that I already have and can build upon doing this.
Yeah.
If you want me to be happy, I just need you to support me doing this or get out of my way.
Yeah.
And to my parents' credit, they got right behind me. They supported me. And that's one of the things we were talking about in the beginning. I've felt some, guilt is the wrong word, but almost like I'm less impressive because I have that parental support that everybody wants to give to their kids. So I didn't talk about it for years, but I had great parents.
Yeah.
And their support in that moment, my wife's support in that moment was crucial to me. So you also talked about, what was it?
Talked about a lot of things.
Yeah. But you said something specific that I wanted to come back to. Whatever, maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. But you're helping people now in an online space in the realm of mostly fitness, right? Oh, I know where I want it to go. I'll come back to it in a second. I think if you were open like this more, like the post that I was really excited to talk to you about was when you made a post on your Instagram about when you experienced burnout, what you decided to do about it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is cool. I wanted to talk to you anyway because I think you're awesome. And I could have talked to you about different exercise, all of that stuff all day long. But I'm way more interested in this.
Yeah.
what I was going to say just fell out of my brain again.
That's okay.
Damn it. Fuck.
Burnout post.
No. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll have to come back to me in time. But anyway. Oh, I know what it was. People, how you describe to people what you do.
Yeah.
So I used to be like, I'm a chiropractor, but not the kind of chiropractor you're thinking. I'm a personal trainer, but I don't do it the way you're thinking.
I hate describing what I do with 75 caveats.
So I was in a Uber with my wife in Austin, Texas, actually in November of last year, November 15th last year. And the Uber driver was like, what do you do? Because I was asking him a bunch of questions because I love asking strangers questions about themselves. And I ended up giving a bunch of health and fitness advice to this guy. He's like, what do you do? And I gave him an answer. My wife was like, after she just looks at me, she's like, what the fuck was that? That's not what you do. That was terrible. Nobody understands that. I'm like, fuck, okay. So what I've started doing now that I'm actually really enjoying is I'll say to people, I'm glad you asked. Have you ever met somebody who, and then I talk about the ideal client who I serve. And they say, yeah. I'm like, I help those people live more active and fulfilled lives.
I like that. Because it's more about, it's like your mission statement almost rather than what you do.
Yes. So I'll say to them, have you ever, I'm really glad that you asked that. I spent my entire life trying to figure out how to explain to people what I do. And I find that the best way to describe it is, have you ever met somebody who spends their life trying to get control of their life? Their fitness goes from one thing to the next, and they're constantly influenced by a person giving them a 5-minute tidbit here, and they think that that's going to change their life. They're eating this crazy stuff, and no matter how much work and stress they put into all of this, their body and their life never gets any better. Their relationships struggle. They still complain about the work that they're doing, and it feels like they're chasing life instead of leading it. Have you ever met somebody like that? People say, yeah. I say, well, I help people like that live more active and fulfilled lives.
I like that.
And then they'll say, well, that's me. How do you do that? Mm-hmm. And now I can have a conversation about them.
Yeah.
Not even about me.
I like that. Because I think it is that awkwardness of describing what you do, especially like for me, I'm so multifaceted and complex. I'm like, how do I explain all of like, how do you explain that you're a business building, PhD getting, science publishing, ultra runner, weightlifter person to people?
Which part of me are you asking?
Like which part? Yeah. Because I have 7 personalities. Yes. So which one do you want to know about right now? Like, and that in itself is intimidating to people because then it's like, you're fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's me, myself, and Irene over here.
Yeah. But I like that, especially because we just did this big rebranding thing, and so much of my business that I'm trying to rebrand to is like the person is my client is the hero. Their story is the hero.
Yes.
How do I help them write their story with health and fitness and exercise? Because for me, it's not about, okay, you getting aerobic fitness and being better at zone 2 cardio. It's the person you become between the start line and the finish line, or between this and the PR, or all of these types of things. And I like that because it's describing like, okay, because we're in the business of helping people. Right? I like that reframe on it because you almost get this awkwardness of talking about yourself when people ask that. You're like, but it's so much easier to talk about just the people that you're helping and serving, right?
Well, again, it's the who, not the what.
Yeah.
And so people, one of the things that I learned that was one of the most valuable things I ever learned is just because somebody asks a question doesn't mean that that's actually the question that they wanted to ask. It's just the best question that they knew how to ask to get the information that they want to glean. And oftentimes, if we give them the answer to their question, they don't actually get what they want. And so it's our job to be able to reframe the question and answer in a way that best fits what we believe they're looking for.
Yes. That's one thing that I think that I've picked up, I've gotten better at with social media and clients is I've learned this over the years because I used to get frustrated because I could feel people's disappointment when I'd answer what they were asking. And I'm like, but that's not what you asked me. And then I realized people don't know how to ask questions. I forget I'm a logical academic who's been trained on how to think and ask questions and synthesize a bunch of different people. They ask the thing they know, right? It's like, well, how do I lose weight? Okay, well, why do you want to lose weight? What do you think? Like you have to kind of start getting down to like the things that they're actually trying to ask, right? Because they're all just asking the same superficial thing. And it's funny because I was just training one of my new coaches on this. I was like, here's what you need to ask back to people when they ask this so we can get the information we need to actually answer the question that they're asking. Because this isn't the starting point that we need to actually help this person. But that's all they know how to say.
It's the person who says, my goal is to lose 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And you say, okay. What I love to ask that person is, what would be different about your life if you were 50 pounds lighter?
Yeah.
What would you do with a body that was 50 pounds lighter than the one that you have? And oftentimes they'll answer things like, they haven't thought about it. But then the ones who have, it'll be things like, I would be more active. I would feel more comfortable outside, like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then the immediate question I like to ask them back is, what is stopping you from doing those things to the degree that you feel comfortable you can do them today? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of all or nothing in people's minds.
Oh my gosh. So much all or nothing.
And so what I find is that when people actually start doing the things, even in micro doses, they become the person who does the things. And as a byproduct of becoming the person who does the things, the weight falls off.
I think that's something that's been helpful for me to learn too. I mean, I'm still a young buck. I feel like I just came out of my 20s, so I feel like I've made a lot of clicks with things that I've thought about.
You did just come out of your 20s.
Yeah, I just came out of my 20s, so I feel like I don't want people to come in here and think
but
like
you've been in your 20s since you were 11.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, that's very fair.
It's been 20 years.
Yeah, it's been 20 years in my 20s. But I realized for me, I think the thing that like, I'm sure you have the similar thing is like, people don't know how to think like that. But I've always thought like that. Well, what's the person that I want to do? I just need to start. I need to do the thing.
Well, that's the responsibility of leadership, Alyssa.
Yeah. I have too much self-responsibility. But I realize people they just do this black and white all or not bucket thinking. They don't think, well, what's the choice that future me did? Or what did I do when I did feel better? Was it my body or was what I was doing? Like, I feel like people, it's like almost like our obligation to get people to start thinking of those things because they don't know. They don't even know that's an option.
But that's why people come to us.
Yes.
It's when I say that's the obligation of leadership. By the way, for those of you watching this, I understand how like self-absorbed this can sound.
Yeah.
It is what it is. The reason people come to you, the reason people come to me is not because they believe that we have the tactic. They think it's because they believe we have the tactic, but it's because they believe that we're living the life that they want to live in some aspect. And they really want to know how we got there. Mm-hmm. And so we, in order to be able to help somebody, have to understand what kind of life do you want to live?
Yeah.
Not how far do you want to run or how fast. Why is that important to you?
What do you think it's going to do for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And because I was, when my wife had our third baby, she went through some significant postpartum mood disorder. People ask, like, why don't you just say postpartum depression? Because it wasn't that. It was like up and down, like whatever. I don't know. That's what it was called.
Yeah.
She went to see somebody for professional help, and I was genuinely concerned that they were going to help her think in a way that was going to lead her to believe that I was the problem. That was my back of the mind.
Yeah.
Mania. I was like, fuck, what if I'm the issue? And I don't even know it. How do I? That was ridiculous thinking. Mm-hmm. But it takes other people to ask the questions that allow us to be like, oh yeah, okay. If that happened, that is what I would do.
Yeah.
And that's your job. That's my job. That's the job of the people on our teams to our clients.
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about this on my drive yesterday because these are things I think about when I'm running. Because I was thinking about how whenever I do these races or these crazy big things, people are like, why do you do this? Right. And I think about how, for me, some of that is just like, that allows me to get to know myself. And then it was leading me to think about how like so many people, like they don't know who they are, what they want. So they just kind of want to try on other people's lives for size and just, oh, I want that. But do you really want that? Because it's like, yeah, you might be inspired by me, but you don't have to want to do all the things that I want to do. But what does that look like for you? People don't ask themselves. And I think that wraps back to even leaving my first PhD program. Like so many people would have been like, well, I'm stuck here now. Yeah. This is it. And I was like, no.
60 more years of this.
That's it. I'm going to do this. Yeah. And I was like, no, this isn't what I want to do. I have a say in how my life goes. And I think a lot of people forget that they have, there is limits on things. I don't want to come off like, oh, everyone can just do what they want. Like there's risk and, choices and hard decisions that come along with that. But I was like, I knew I had a say in that. I got to choose how my PhD experience was going to go. I didn't have to feel like shit and hate my life because you're going to hate your life anyway. So you might as well enjoy what you're doing at least while you're doing one of the most miserable things you're ever going to do. But I had a say in how that was going to go. And I think that so many people forget, they get to have a say. They just kind of follow this hamster wheel of what you should do or what you have to do. And then they like wake up one day and they're like, shit, I hate this. I don't feel good. Mm-hmm. Or I think so much, I think sometimes, at least I try to do this when I do decide to be a human on social media, shake people up and think about like, who are you? Mm-hmm. What do you want? What defines you? Like, who are you actually as a person? Not just like scrolling through the reels and saying, that seems like a personality that I would like to try to see if I can fit myself into. But like, who are you actually and like not boxing yourself in and choosing to be that. And I don't think enough people, or they do and they buried it because it's like that 15-year-old in them. That's their version of my 15-year-old running on my back roads in the rain, envisioning myself on stage, right? I just decided to chase that because I knew that was me. I think a lot of people, they just box that up and tuck it away and they forget like that's, I don't know, they don't bring that out enough to like actually say like, who am I and what do I want to do and why does this matter to me and why do I care about this?
I think in a lot of ways, people do think about that stuff.
Yeah.
And then they're just scared.
That too.
And so I think that there's a reasonable case that we are the result of our tolerance for fear and risk. Some people have too much, right? And it gets us in trouble.
It's funny you say that, Sean. I'm so fucking afraid all the time.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm a highly anxious, highly scared person. I was thinking about this yesterday too on my long drive because I was thinking about Kona. She's so scared of everything.
Right.
And I laughed because I was like, I can't even blame her because that's me. I'm constantly scared while I'm doing these things, right? And it's sometimes you wish you could show people, you're like, no, I'm just as scared as you doing this. But you kind of have to just be, you get better at failing and you get better at being scared. And finally, after years of doing that, I'm watching it finally get desensitized. You know what I mean? But I'm like, that's just funny that you said that because I was literally just thinking that. I was like, I'm just as damn afraid of everything as this dog.
Do you know who Jimmy Carr is?
I think so, yeah.
He's typically a one-liner comedian.
Yeah.
He's a genius of one-liner after one-liner after one-liner after one-liner for an hour.
Yeah.
He was recently on a podcast with Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. I recommend everybody listen to the Jimmy Carr episode on Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. It was extremely insightful and it was a beautiful conversation. One of the things he said is his new special, which I haven't watched yet because, like I said, we have no screens in our house until the end of April. One of the things he said is in his new special, he decided, I don't want to be the guy who's only one-liners.
Yeah.
I want to tell the story. And he said, and so I did. And he's like, I think it's the best comedy I've ever done. And I was scared when I wrote it and I was scared when I delivered it. And he's like, and I believe that if what we're doing in life doesn't cause us some level of imposter syndrome, then we're not actually doing anything that we're passionate about. And I'm bastardizing his quote. I didn't know I was going to say it.
I get the gist.
But yeah, the thing was like, if you don't have imposter syndrome, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life if you're so comfortable? And I found that beautiful because I was in the middle of, when I listened to that, it was 3 a.m. I was feeding my baby, right? We have a newborn at home and I'm up every night between 2 and 3 a.m. feeding him. Getting later now, which is good. And there are some things that I've been on the verge personally, and I talked about it on this podcast, of I think it's time for me to take another big step. But who am I to take that step? And then I heard him say that and I was like, oh, fuck you. I have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's funny because I've been having a lot of conversations with friends recently too. Is like, it's really weird. And I'm sure you had this happen, obviously, because I feel like you're that next level of business and life in many ways. And it's, that's why it's great to have people like you to connect with, where everything I ever want is happening. And it's happening at warp speed. And it's happening so fast that I can't even, that it's almost, I shared with my friends the other day. I was like, I'm getting everything I ever wanted. And it's also like so overwhelming. Yeah. You can't say that because that sounds terrible.
Why can't you say that?
Well, because people aren't getting what they want, right? And they resent you anyway for what you have. And you're like, how do you explain that? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting everything I ever wanted. But holy shit. And it's funny because it's like I'm still struggling with that. Like for the longest time, all through grad school, my postdoc, I'm like, is this the moment I fuck it up? Is this the moment I fuck it up?
When does the bottom fall out?
And now I'm doing so much stuff that I'm like, it's funny because it's like, I'm like, I had this same transition with myself when I kind of really got over my massive imposter syndrome, like to the point that I was like holding myself back kind of thing. Like I got sick of myself. I was like, Alyssa, how many times are you going to keep doing these things until you realize that like, this is what you do and who you are. Right. And like, instead of leaning into this, like, oh my God, this is when the bottom falls out. I'm kind of trying to lean into it more of like, it's scary, but like it's exciting and like not letting it kind of, like, and this is new to me because in December, January, I was in the same beginning phase of all this and I was freaking out for like a month about my workload. And for some reason now it's just like, I'm like, no, you need to lean into the season of growth. You need to take the step up. Like, this is what you need to be doing. And it's still scary and intimidating, but I've reframed it. I'm like, no, this is the next thing that you have to be doing. This is the step that you need to take. You need this nudge and this push and this like acceleration. And you can be scared, but you have to trust that this isn't when the bottom falls out. Like, you can't keep doing this to yourself that you're like, oh my God, this is when the bottom falls out and it all comes crumbling beneath me kind of thing. But it is weird to all of a sudden have everything that you ever wanted and feel it on turbo mode.
There's two things I want to say to that. One of them is there's another expression that I like that is the bird on the branch feels safe, not because it trusts the branch, but because it trusts its wings.
Yeah.
Right? Like the bottom inevitably will fall out.
Yeah.
And it will be something that yesterday you couldn't handle. And then today it happens and you're like, oh, I have to solve for this. And it's kind of like, I imagine you haven't been in a fist fight before, but
I played women's lacrosse,
right.
so I've gone a little aggressive,
but
not a fist fight. Right? Yeah.
I remember being terrified of ever getting into a fight. And then the first time I got into a fight, I was like, oh, I kind of like this. Like, it's not good. Like
yeah.
So, but you're scared. And then it happens like, oh, okay. That's all that this is? I'm good with this.
And it's funny because I think for the longest time, I was worried that without my fear, I wouldn't work hard.
I think that that's reasonable.
Yeah. I was like, without my fear, because I'm known for not just showing up to do something and doing well, but I always over deliver. I over supersede, but that's just driven by sheer anxiety of the situation. I'm like, well, if I lose that, do I lose myself? And I'm like, well, what about the self that is just confident the whole time? Well, what does she do?
There's something I want to challenge you on.
Yeah.
I think, and this is one of those, I'm trying to figure out a way to say it so it avoids language I've been trying to avoid, and I'm not good enough to do that yet. So I'm just going to say,
okay. I won't take any offense.
I think that you should lean into accepting and being proud that you're getting everything that you want.
Yeah.
And allow the people who resent you for that and the people who are upset with you for that and who don't want to follow you for that to fall away.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole other group of people who just want to be around people who are getting everything that they want because it's inspiring to them that they might be able to get.
I started to do that a lot. That's part of my humanness thing that I've been doing the last year and a half is I felt, because I remember writing a caption a few years ago where I was like, what I'm doing no longer feels relatable. It feels hateable. I remember writing that line. It doesn't feel relatable. It feels hateable. And I stopped talking about, and you probably noticed this too. Well, because you made that post the other day, I stopped talking about how hard I work and what I'm doing and what I'm achieving and the goal thing. And I'm like, no, I'm going to start telling my story again. I'm going to start telling the story again about, because I am getting everything I want. But instead of making it look at me, I want to show you, hey, this is the point A that you didn't see. But that got me to point B. But like, this is what I wish this person know. And if you're in this position, I want you to not feel defeated because this is what I got to from here. And like making, still linking it back to like people. But I started leaning to it. This is very recent, like the last few months, I started leaning into owning that again. And I was like, I don't care. I'm like, I am successful. And I'm so sick of feeling like I'm a bad person for being successful, right? I'm so sick of feeling guilty because I got it. And, maybe it's because of my default wiring. And maybe I'm just, it's not, part of it. It's like, you want to be like, well, it's just because I worked hard. And I'm like, no, I think I'm just also wired in a way that this was always going to happen no matter what, where I went and no matter what I did, I was going to be successful, right? My best friend, Corey, the one that owns the gym that I was telling you about, when I was so torn between doing my postdoc or my business and moving to Colorado and like not knowing what Regis was doing in it was the biggest leap of unknown coming out of my PhD. And he looked at me when he like said goodbye to me before I left Georgia. And he said, Alyssa, no matter where you're going to be successful because you're going to be you, no matter where you go. And it was just like, it's so cheesy, but it was like, it's true. It was like, it doesn't matter where I was going to land. I was going to either be a fully funded NIH pipeline scientist, FKT, R01 pipeline scientist.
Nobody knows what that means.
No, that's not what it means. I know, I was going to be, an NIH funded grant chasing scientist and probably be good at it, even though I definitely am not as naturally good at science as I am everything else, but I would have done it. Or I was going to lean into this thing. And I kind of did both in a way. But, I kind of started to just accept the fact that I was like, you're just good because you're just good. You know what I mean? Like, you're okay. It's okay to say that, like, this is who I am. It's my default setting. And, like, I think the difference is bringing it back to how you, and I also don't like it all the time where it doesn't have to always be about bringing it back to other people. Because sometimes I'm like, I can just do things for me. You can do things for yourself.
I think we do everything for ourselves.
We do everything for ourselves. We're inherently selfish.
Like if we give money to charity and the charity was like, that's it, we would stop giving money to that charity.
Yeah.
No, I want to feel good about this.
Yeah, I still
don't rob me of that.
I still want to chase these dreams and these goals for myself, but it's like still not even me right now. It's like that little 15-year-old inside of me. Like I made in that post, like I'm doing everything now how and for that 15-year-old version of myself. Because that was probably my most true, innocent, pure self, and bringing that back. But I'm like, when I think about all the stuff that I do, it's like, yeah, I don't want to do it because the people in my college gave me shit, or these people online hate me. And I'm like, I'm going to do it because I want to be a good person who does good work and loves what they do and shares that joy with others. And I also want to show people, as part of that, I was like, you can be happy and not hate yourself and be successful. I think, especially, I started talking about this more too, like the world of everyone's like success and biohacking and all this stuff. And it all comes from this like place of like self-hate. And I'm like, I fucking love myself. I'm so proud of myself. I am my own hero, but I didn't get to this level of success by like dipping myself in cold, looking in the mirror and saying, you're a piece of shit who needs to be better every single day. Right? Like, it's because I woke up and was like, I'm going to take care of me today. I love myself. I believe in me and my dreams. And I think we need more of that. I think that was probably my biggest driving factor, is like, people need to see more people who are having fun and being successful, or loving themselves and being successful. Like, my success never came from a place of like hating myself. And I feel like that's usually people, and there's nothing wrong with that. People have this catalyst of change because they hit a low in their life or something like rock bottom or whatever. And for me, it was never that. It was just like, just a type A firstborn daughter working like hell for a decade. Like, I was like, there's nothing to it other than like, I just like saw dreams and I chased them, kind of thing. And I don't know. I think there's like multiple directions of that, but I was like, I want to start sharing this instead of hiding it and acting like it's not true, because it is true. Like, I'm like, people see what you're doing. Like, it's like funny, like the last few years my mom would be like, so and so and these people know how well you're doing. I'm like, people know if you're doing well, you don't need to tell them. Like, you just, but I'm like, I'm also not gonna like pretend like it's not happening anymore. Right. Like, I'm just gonna own it and accept it. But you can be humble and be grateful without being like,
well, there's some thin lines out there, and one of the thinnest is the line between jealousy and envy. And jealousy is thinking, because you have it, I can't. Envy is thinking, because you have it, I want it. You've shown me what can be there. And then there's one more thin line, which in this math is between envy and inspiration. And envy you can choose envy to be positive or negative. I think that when you choose it to be negative, it becomes just toxic hate that you build within. Like, I want what that person has and I can have it, but the world's not giving it to me, even though I deserve it. That's not fair. And I talked about that in the talk.
And that was me in my early 20s.
Me too.
I hated every influencer on social media because they don't know what I know, and they're not a master's student, and I can't believe that they're getting this traction. And I just had to get over myself. Yes. I was like,
well, the other side, the positive side of envy is inspiration. Yeah. I see Alyssa doing that, which means there's a path for me to do it. And so I'm going to make Alyssa my mentor without ever asking her to be my mentor. I'm just going to absorb everything that she talks about. I'm going to add value to the conversation in her comments section. I'm going to send her messages of thankfulness and gratitude without being creepy. Yeah. Hey, you made this post, and I thought
not asking me where I live in the process. Right. Yeah.
I thought this post was really cool. It inspired me to do this, and I just thought you'd like to know that. Yeah. That has immense value. And having that gratitude for other people makes us more successful.
Yeah, and you have to have that, because I think about I have that. You know what I mean? And I think, well, where would I be in life if I didn't have those people 3 steps ahead that showed me the light beam of that, right? Like, because that's like human, we're wired that way. When someone does something, then you know that you can do it, right? Yep. How many people broke the 5-minute mile once the first person, or the 4-minute mile, whatever that is? Like, as soon as someone did it, it was like boom, 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 because everyone knew that they can do it. And it's like, and that's always been my big thing too, especially like, wrapping back to like, everyone was just so freaking mean to me. And I was just like a young girl with a big personality who just cared a lot. I just cared a lot about everything I did. And that's the thing, is so I just decided, I was like, well, instead of hating people, I'm going to just show people that they can do it too. I'm like, I don't want you to feel like what I'm doing is untouchable. You're never going to be me. I don't want you to be me. But I want you to see that you can go do and be the thing that makes sense for you and you want to be. And it's hard too, because there's a line of like, not everyone's going to be successful. But I think that comes down more to people giving up once they get to the first resistance.
It depends on your definition of success.
Exactly.
Like for me, I'm not successful by my own definition of success, which is insane. Yeah. But I don't know that I ever will be.
Well, what's your definition of success?
Absolute, complete freedom. Like, I'm talking like, oh, I want to go there today with the whole family for 3 months, have a chef, like all of that. Yeah. That's the financial side of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
money buys freedom, though.
What's that? It does. Money buys some freedom. Yeah. And then the physical side is like, I also want to, I want to work out for like 2 hours a day. I don't, but I want to.
That also is partly in my line of success too, is being able to work out for 2 hours a day without the stress of knowing that there's a million things coming in.
Yeah, I don't need anything coming in. Yeah. I want to have inbound of so many people asking me to be on their podcasts and their stages that I need somebody on our team to help me decide which ones to do. Like, I want my wife to have everything that she could ever want in her life. I want to take care of my whole family, both from a financial, social, like all of it. That's success for me. And right now I have a lot of it. I don't have all of it. And I think that it's one of those interesting things where if somebody would have said to you or to me 5 years ago, hey, this is where you're going to be, is that success? Are you kidding me? I'm making $30,000 a year right now, working 18-hour days. Yes, I'll take that all day. And now that I have it, I'm like, well, it'd be nice to have more.
And you kind of feel like an asshole wanting more,
no,
right?
I don't.
But I don't. I don't. The problem is I don't know if I know how to want anything but more. You know what I mean? I don't know if I ever, the thing is, I think there's a big key. You have to make sure that you're happy and content where you're at. Like, I'm not unhappy right now where I'm at. Right. That's the biggest thing.
But
like,
that's the balance. Unhappy, it's finding contentment in
like, I'm grateful and I'm having fun. It's actually the first time in my professional working life where I am working a lot and it doesn't feel as bad. You know what I mean? It's still very stressful, but it's not. It's like I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm having fun. I'm overwhelmed, but it's all things that I don't really resent most of the things that I'm doing, which is huge, right? Like I used to resent so many of the things that I was doing, right?
Sliding scale,
right? Like it's funny because I came to this year and I'm like, I'm going to work less in 2024. I'm never going to work less, but I can be more fulfilled and enjoy and have more fun and not make it feel like such a chore. Yeah. And that's where I'm kind of starting to strike that balance a little bit more. But yeah, it's funny because I'm like, okay, I'm always going to want more, but I have to make sure that I'm staying content and happy in the phase that especially now, because I think it's Alexi Pappas. I just read her memoir. I listened to her podcast on Rich Roll. And I try not to like be too inspired and relate to people too much because I don't want to co-opt their lived experience as like your own, but we also look for relatability in people. But I related to a lot of the stuff that she talked about that, she's an Olympic level athlete and phenomenal athlete and stuff like that. But a lot of her story, I was like, oh, I can see bits of that. But she said the quote that I really like that I keep reminding myself is like, you're in the dream when you're in the dream when you're living it. Like it's not the end line. It's when you're in it. And I thought, when I first listened to her podcast a few months ago, I thought, oh my God, am I past that? Like I thought like, oh, I'm on this pathway of like getting my PhD and growing my business. And I think I hit a plateau because I was in another work grind phase. And I thought, oh, well, this is it. I got to this point and then everything started to boom again. And I've really leaned into like the past like 2-3 months, maybe 6 months now, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in this. I'm not going to work through and close my eyes and let it flash before me. I'm going to be in this because this is everything that I've worked for 12 years is like literally happening right now. And I'm like, you need to be in it while you're in it. Because otherwise you're just going to forget how that felt when all this happened and you were doing all these things and like you're in the dream. Don't just rush to that next thing. Like actually be in it when you're in it. And so that's something that I've been working on right now is like, I think that's helped too with the gratitude and groundedness and not being so overwhelmed by it is like, I'm not trying to rush past it to get to the next part. I'm in it now.
I think that's a great place to end.
Okay.
That was great. I really appreciate you being so transparent. Like this, I love these kinds of conversations.
It's probably the most open I've been in a public platform in a few years. So.
Well, I appreciate the privilege of being.
Thank you for letting me be a human.
It's the only kind of people I want to sit across from.
Yeah.
Alyssa, I'll make sure people know where they can find you in the show notes. Is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't give you an opportunity to speak about?
I think that's all of it. You could talk forever about everything, but sure. I guess, thank you for listening and letting me be a human to your ears. If you actually tuned in and listened to this.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
Turn pro. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life Podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.